We're live, Mr. Warden.
All right. I'd like to call this Budget Committee meeting to order. Welcome to everyone. April 20th, 1 o'clock. First item up on our agenda is approval of our agenda. Has everyone read it? Any errors, omissions, anything you want to add? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve it. Moved by French, second by Dominique. Catherine, please call the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Councillor Giguère.
Yes.
Councillor Ketchabah.
Yes.
Councillor French.
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes.
4-0, the motion is carried.
Thank you. So we have our agenda. We have minutes to approve. Has everyone read them, satisfied? Again, if you are, I'll entertain a motion. Moved by Ketchabah, second by French. Please, Catherine, call the vote.
Councillor Giguère.
Yes.
Councillor Ketchabah.
Yes.
Councillor French.
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes,
4-0, the motion is carried.
thank you for that. Next is a reminder disclosure of pecuniary interest. Not seen anyone, so we'll declare none. No delegations, briefings and reports. Draft 2020 annual report. Catherine, you're going to lead us on that, please?
I am going to let Jim start off and then I'll jump in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Jim.
So in the past, when we've done annual reports, when it first started off, we had paper reports that were published. Then we advanced to creating PDF reports, which is really just a picture of a paper report. Really, it was no different in terms of content and layout. It's just that you could send it over email, but it looked just like a paper report. What we're going to propose today is migrating that to a web-based version to make it interactive and a lot more approachable to our end users so that they can see at a very high summary level the key information that they're interested in. If they want to drill down, there's capability that they can open up accordions and look at more detail or click on links to get more information, but they're not overwhelmed with a large report that they have to sift through to get to the information that they're interested in. So that's what we're going to present here today. And the numbers are not final. We're still working on those, but we want to get the focus today is going to be more on the layout and the presentation to see if we can get any feedback from the committee as to better ways that we can present this information. What you're looking at right now is the cover page of the report, and just gives us an overview of the report itself. And you can see at the top then the links to the different sections of the report, being the message from the warden and treasurer, overview of council, discussion of our achievements, the numbers, key numbers, and then the dollars. So we can scroll down to the next page. And so here you'll see then you can open these up and look at the message from the warden as an example. And then the same thing for the treasurer. We don't need to bother opening that up. We can scroll down to the next page. So the third page then just shows our council. And when you hover above the images, you'll see then who that councillor is, which municipality they represent. So again, just at an overview. Moving on to the next page, this is where we have the county by numbers, and we've broken it into two manageable chunks. The first one, quality of life, is where we put the soft services. The second category we call delivering results, and that's where we put what I would call the hard services. So if we can start with quality of life. So under quality of life, this is where we have key data for the services being homes, libraries, and EMS. And so you can see there's some key statistics on any of those services. So we can pause here if there's anything that the committee had questions on, or if you wanted one of the individual services to speak to their data.
Questions for Jim? Not hearing any, Jim.
All right, so next we'll go to delivering results. And in this section, we have POA, transportation, and economic development. And same thing where we're just putting in some key statistics that people may be interested in. Then moving on to page 5 is our achievements. And Catherine, do you want to talk through this one?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Warden, through you to the committee. This is a list of the big achievements that the county was able to achieve in 2020. We do this in the annual report every year. We first started off with a little bit of a discussion about our COVID-19 response and the redeployment of staff and the ability to continue our services despite a very difficult year. We discussed the finalization of the strategic plan, council strategic plan, and we also link in that section to the strategic plan page in case anyone who's reading wants to learn a little bit more about our strategic plan and the progress that we're making. Similarly, we discussed the completion of the service delivery review, and we link to the service delivery review page on the county's website so that individuals can see the results of the service delivery review, and then also the items that council indicated would be investigated and implemented in 2021. We also included the live streaming of council and committee meetings, as we think that this is this was indicated in our strategic plan as something that council wanted to do, and we were kind of pushed into it by COVID, but it's been a very good way to be more transparent and visible to the public and allowing them to see the inner workings of council and committees and understand what council does. The next section is building bridges, and we talk about both the completion of the Imperial Road Bridge in Port Bruce, as well as the work that's going on the King George Lift Bridge in Port Stanley, and we link to the King George Lift Bridge update page. Next, we talked about the construction in the village of Sparta and the reconstruction that occurred this past summer. We talk a little bit about the donation that we received from the Bushel estate that's going towards several different projects at the museum. We talked about the Terrace Lodge redevelopment breaking ground. I noticed that I didn't link it in there, but it will be eventually linked to the page that has project updates for the Terrace Lodge redevelopment. We also talk about the Terrace Lodge fundraising campaign and the launch, and link to the campaign page for that as well. We also discuss one of the major achievements of council was to start up a connectivity committee in 2020. So we discussed that and link to the connectivity committee page. Similarly, we do so with the budget committee. This process was really modernized and improved upon in 2020 and going forward into 2021. So we link to the budget committee website as well. Environmental committee, we are just getting started with the environmental committee, and council developed priorities for the committee as well. I do want to put a little bit more information in this section. I just didn't have time to finish it before I wanted it to go out in the agenda, but we'll also be linking to the environmental committee page as well. Similarly, we've got the community safety and well-being plan and linking to that page for updates. And then finally, we have the funding announcement that occurred at our building in July from the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport for $15,000 in funding for the Elgin County Museum. We all remember that very hot day. So that was sort of the list of major achievements, but we are open to adding more if there are any that the committee can think of that we may have missed in the process. And so, yeah, that's about it for the achievements section.
So, and on that, that's a good example of where in the old way of doing it, we would have had that very long multi-page printout or a PDF that discuss all of those points. And now you've got that nice compact list. If somebody doesn't want to read all of that, they can just drill down on the one item that they might be interested in. It just makes it a lot more approachable. And I think that's where a lot of people are at in terms of their mindset nowadays and how they get information. Next, moving on to your dollars at work. On the left of the page, you'll see what our actual expenditures were. So we spent 73 million in operating expenses, another 28 million in expenditures for just over $100 million of spending. And then on the right, you can drill down to see some detail. Yep, thank you. So, and this report is comprised of a series of pie charts. We cover revenue, expenditures, capital, net spend, and then how it's all funded. To start off with the revenue, you'll see here how our revenue is split up in terms of sources. And it's important to note that in the past, half of our money used to come in from government funding. That has now been replaced where almost half is by property tax, and government funding has dropped down to about 38%. Moving on to expenditures. On the expenditures, you can see here that long-term care makes up the bulk of our spending, 37%. Roads makes up 18%, and ambulance makes up 15%. On the capital side, the bulk of the spending is in roads and bridges to maintain our infrastructure, with 83% of the spend. Moving on to net spend. First, maybe a discussion around what net spend represents. So these are our expenditures in both operating and capital. And from that, we're deducting any revenue that those services have generated. So that's either from user fees or from government funding to those programs. And here you'll see that long-term care makes up, and that, excuse me, on this chart, we're still updating. So the numbers there aren't representative, but you'll see the correct numbers in the table below. So if you open that up, Carolyn. So transportation services, they make up 52% of our net spend, with long-term care being 19%, ambulance 9%, and cultural services 7%. So that'll be updated in the pie chart above as we finalize these numbers. And then lastly, you saw up above that we had $1,687 of net spend. And in addition to that, we also put in $39 into reserves. That was funded then by two sources, one being our property taxes at just over $1,500, and the remainder being through debt of $225. And so then a resident can see how their property taxes are used to fund services, how their property taxes are being supplemented by debt or reserves to fund those services. Ultimately, in the long run, it all has to be funded by property tax, but from year to year, you can use debt and reserves as a way to migrate from one level of spending to another. And so that's what's getting presented through these various charts. It's never easy to absorb all this financial information, but I think through the pie charts, it makes it a little easier. But we're certainly looking to any guidance from the committee to help us improve the layout and presentation of that information. And maybe before we open up to questions, just really quick on the last page, the back cover of the report. Here, there'll be links to key documents like the FIR, the auditor statements, salary disclosures, and council remuneration, as well as contact information. So we've gone through it fairly quickly, but I think we can go back and then look at anything specifically based on questions that the committee may have. And we are looking for any suggestions on how to make it better.
Comments for Jim? Questions? Mary?
I just want to make a comment that I think this is amazing, Jim. You and your staff have done a great job, and things that like this, they get better over time. So I mean, I can't suggest right off the top of my head something that you could change, but if we start with something like this as year after year comes along, I'm sure that we'll all realize that there are some changes we can make. But I think it's great. It's going to make it so much easier for our residents.
Well, and a lot of that thank you, I think, should be directed to Catherine because she's the one who's made it all look as pretty as it does.
So acknowledged. Dominique?
Yeah, I concur through you, Mr. Chair, that, yeah, this is very impressive. It's so easy to access and it's very self-directed. If you want to know more, you can drill down more or less. So really, congratulations to the team. Yeah, I don't have any immediate feedback. I did have one question when we say per household. Does that mean, so is it an average? Or is it an actual, or are we dividing by the actual number of households? I was trying to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, so any of these numbers are going to be averages where we take the dollars and we divide by households.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
have a
go ahead.
suggestion on how to make that clearer. I'm just trying to think, if someone is saying I'm spending 600 or 1687 in total, so well, but I'm spending more than that. And so I don't know if there's a way to include the word average, if that clarifies or not, like as I'm thinking out loud here. Yeah, I think that's about the only thing in the next section on how it's all funded. It might be just in case someone does not drill down on those blue arrows, you know, the surplus, or if you just look at the pie chart and you see 39 or 225, it may not be clear that that's per household, like that term. So maybe we need to put per household on the graphic itself. But this is like really small things because I agree overall, this makes it way more accessible, I think. Congratulations.
Thank you for that. Ed, you had a comment.
I was simply going to reiterate what has already been spoken about, and I would agree with Dominique's observation that if there were some way you could identify it that these are representative costs per average household, because obviously everybody's taxes are different. And but this is just an illustration. And that's, we just keeping in mind that's what this is. But I like the interactiveness of it. I like how it's simplified. I agree with the earlier comments of going through pages and pages of PDF forms just to get to what you may be looking for. It's a little frustrating. So no, I think this is a very useful tool. And yeah, I look forward to it being implemented.
Great comments. Okay, very good. I'm impressed. Do we need to receive that, Julie or Catherine?
Mr. Warden, perhaps we could approve it for presentation to council in, Jim, it's going to be presented to council?
Yeah, our goal will be to bring this at the end of May to council.
Okay, so do we need to do anything today or just receive it?
Oh, yeah, we could just receive and file for presentation to council in May.
Okay. Mover and seconder, please.
One quick second, it might be helpful for council to hear that the budget committee supports and endorses this as the approach.
Yeah.
Just as a recommendation.
Yeah, with enthusiasm.
Now you're putting words in our mouth.
Are you moving it, sir?
Okay.
Seconder, please. French. So we have a mover and seconder. Catherine, is everyone satisfied with do you want to read the motion, or is everyone happy with it before we vote? Let's vote. I think we all got it.
Councillor
Call the
Jaguar,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchabah,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes, for sure.
4-0, the motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Just lost, there it is. Budget adjustments, Director of Financial Services. Jim, are you taking that?
Yeah, I'll take us through that. Thank you, Mr. Warden. So in this report, and whenever we have our budget committee meetings going forward, we'll bring a report like this that will show you what adjustments we've made to the budget, and looking then for your approval for those to remain in the budget and then ultimately get approved by council. In this case, since we had council approval in February, the changes that we've put in and are in front of you for consideration are a reduction in net spend of $550,000. And Carolyn, can you pull up page 11 of the PDF onto the screen, please? And yeah, perfect. So there you can see the 550,000 in the top table of changes. And if we just scroll down a little bit to look at the explanation of changes there, we'll start by looking at items 1 through 4. These are changes where revenue has come in and it's offset by spending. So COVID and Safe Restart funding. Revenue has come in and we've put in spending budget accordingly, as well as there's been some other changes for governmental funding where we've received some more money, and the government expects us obviously to spend that money. So there's no change in net budget, but it is a change in revenue and expenses. And then there were some funded projects as well, again, where it's some revenue has come in and with associated costs. This morning, we had the discussion around efficiency funding related to intranet. So this will then get adjusted and you'll see those numbers change for when we meet the next time. But here we were moving money from the efficiency reserve into the IT budget for operating and capital. So at that time, there was no net change in spending. But we'll adjust that so that it's only covered for 2021, and in future years, it'll be an increase in the budget without a reduction in the efficiency reserve. Just scroll back up there a little bit, Carolyn, please. Thank you. The last line on this page is inflation. That's related to the non-union wages. At the time of the budget, as a placeholder, we had put in 2% for the budget. 1.75% is what has been approved. So we adjusted each of the individual line items for non-union spending accordingly. And it's $30,000 a year, which over the 10 years adds up to almost $390,000. So that's the bulk of the $550,000 change that you saw at the top of the page is related to that wage inflation. And now to the next page, please. Item 7 is related to the shared planner with Southwold and West Elgin. Here again, there's no change in net cost. The revenue that we're getting in is covering the expenses for wages and operating costs. Item 8 for staffing. This isn't we do have an increase in cost in 2021. This is so that when we can allow for job shadowing for the maintenance person at Beaubier this year. And then in the outlying years, we've just had some adjustments for work days for some of the staff training coordinator and the support services manager at the homes, which has provided some savings in the outlying years. Item 9, just a small item. Revenue comes in for donations for Terrace Lodge, and we're then adding in a budget line item to be able to spend that money. So no net change. 10 is just, these are reports that have gone to council for various projects where we're moving money from one line item to the next. And then on the last item, we have for IT, we're just making an adjustment for a project that should have been marked as carry forward when we did the budget, and we're just correcting that right now. So it's keeping 68,000 of spending available on a project that should have been left open. Last item on this page is for Graham Scott Ends. We rent some server room space, and we're adjusting the budget to match our actuals on that. If we can then scroll down next to page 14. There's, for each of the various departments, we have a page that looks like this. In it, you'll see the 2019 and 20 actuals, as well as what we're carrying forward for any projects that are staying open, and we're carrying some budget reserve to complete those projects. That's the third column that you'll see there, as well as then the 10 years of budget through 2021 through 2030. And that meets, I believe, the requirements of the request from the committee to have that level of detail going forward. And we're set up to provide this right down to the project level detail. We had presented this back in November. In the November presentation, we had it split into 2 reports because we didn't have the capability to combine the project and non-project together at that time. But we've now got this in place so that you can see all of that on one page, just to make everything simpler and easier to review. So that is everything for this report, and the recommendation is that the proposed budget adjustments be presented to council for approval and that the report be received and filed.
Questions or comments for Jim? All right. Are we good with that recommendation?
Mr. Chair, just a
Dominique?
question. So thank you for providing this information. Thank you to staff for making it possible. So that is appreciated. I was trying to interpret that very first page, I guess page 14. So I'm assuming, so that is a summary of all the main categories, and under wages, I was trying to understand the 2019, the 2020 forecast and the 2021 budget. So there's quite a bit of fluctuation in those 3 lines. And so can you speak to those so I can understand a bit better?
Sure. So Carolyn, can you put that back on the screen, please? Now, is it this page that you were looking at, or were you looking at an earlier page, Councillor Jiguer?
That's the same page. It's a little bit small, but it's basically under, is it the net income that goes
So maybe
under?
we can scroll up. I think maybe you're referring to an earlier page. If we can scroll up a page, please. To the table above, please. Is this the where you were looking at that detail?
So that was actually page 14. So I was just trying to make sure I was interpreting the details. So that first page, is it just for administrative services? So from page 14 onward, it's all by department.
Yes.
There isn't a summary page. Okay. And actually, so then that answers my next question. So that's good.
So in the future, if you want to see a summary of net income by department, we can do that. And we could do the same for capital.
I would say, I think for me, I can only speak for myself. I'm gonna over time just become more familiar with this before making any suggestions of either providing something different or additional.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further questions? I'm assuming, oh, Mary, go ahead.
It's not a question, Mr. Warden, it's just a comment. I want to thank staff for going into this, you know, length of information, but honestly, it really does help us. And I do appreciate all your hard work because this really gives us a bigger picture. So we have a lot more information. And I think it's going to make all of our jobs easier in the long run. So thank you.
Okay. And Ed, you had a comment.
Well, once again, my colleagues beat me to it, but that's fine. Again, my thanks to staff for providing this level of detail. The actuals and the forecast 2019, 2020, I find very useful for me as it establishes a historical trend and something to base observations going forward. So thank you for providing that, Jim. I realize it's a little bit of extra work to do it, but I think it simplifies an explanation for me, and perhaps I can make things easier on you by not asking so many questions in the future.
Okay. Are we looking for a motion that will recommend this to county council? Okay, so I'll need a motion. Seconder, mover and seconder.
That's presupposing that we're actually going to have the 2020 final numbers before it goes to council. I assume that's what's going to happen, correct?
We could leave this until the end of March, and then we'll have the completed 2020 numbers hopefully by then. We're still waiting on social services and workers' comp final numbers to come in.
So that's the end of May then we're talking.
Yes. Did I say March?
Yes, you
May.
did. Although it
Actually,
feels like March out there today.
Yes.
Or it might be February. So I'm looking to Catherine or Julie. Do we need a motion or are we okay? I'm seeing a head yes, nod yes. Julie?
I would just recommend again that the committee, that perhaps the recommendation is, whereas the committee thoroughly reviewed this information and recommended that this be presented to council once the 2020 actuals are available. Something to that effect. Catherine can wordsmith.
Okay. Mover and seconder to that. Ed and Mary, I guess you won that. Please call the vote, Catherine.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchabah,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes,
4-0, the motion is carried.
thank you. That leaves us with first quarter performance, Jim.
Yeah, and this is really quick. We have year-to-date performance of $176,000. That is predominantly explained by wages. With COVID, we're trying to maintain as tight a control on wages as possible, and as a result, we're having some positions stay vacant for some time. And that has resulted between economic development, library services, administrative services, museum and archives, and engineering, all having some open positions that had $152,000 of performance. The only other one was we had a retrofit rebate, which we hadn't budgeted, and that gave us $10,000. And then there was just some other little minor adjustments as well, or performance items. But those two basically explain the vast majority of it. And the recommendation here is that this be received and filed, and then we would bring this forward to the meeting at the beginning of May to council.
All right, questions, comments for Jim? All right. Mover and seconder for Jim's recommendation. Dominique and Mary. Catherine, please call the vote.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchiba,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes,
4-0, the motion is carried.
thank you for that. Does anyone have anything for other business? New business? Okay. We have no correspondence. Have we picked a next meeting date suggestion?
No, I would suggest if we were meeting quarterly, then the next meeting we could do later in July, beginning of August.
All right. Don't see anyone alarmed by that, so we'll stay tuned for a date then. Do we have anything else to bring forward from anyone? Then I think, unless I'm missing something, we're at adjournment. And there's nothing else, so I'll look for a motion to move adjournment. Mary? Mary and Ed, please call the vote, Catherine.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchiba,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes,
4-0, the motion is carried.
thank you. We are adjourned.